My brother's face drained from confident tan to ash gray as $520,000 appeared on the boardroom screen behind me. 12 shareholders sat frozen in their chairs. The numbers glowed under fluorescent lights: 22 months of theft, 4 hidden accounts, 14 falsified documents. What is this? Brent's voice came out strangled. Where did you get? I clicked to the next slide. Camera footage from September showed him in the parking garage, envelope in hand. October showed late night transfers he thought no one was monitoring. November showed emails to vendors who didn't exist. He'd locked me out of the company system 9 weeks earlier, thinking that would end the fight before it started. Fired the accountant who questioned his expense reports. Convinced our mother to sign guardianship papers claiming I was mentally unfit to manage finances. Submitted a fraudulent psychiatric evaluation to every shareholder 4 days before this meeting. But I'd recorded him bribing the psychiatrist. Kept copies of every deleted document. Cross-referenced security footage with bank statements until the pattern became undeniable. The board chair removed his reading glasses. Motion for immediate CEO removal pending criminal investigation. Second, said Victor Ashford, the senior shareholder who'd known our father for 40 years. 11 hands rose. Brent couldn't vote on his own removal. 3 weeks later, I would sit in the office that finally bore my nameplate. The company our father built with one concrete mixer and a dream would survive because I'd refused to leave when leaving would have been easier. But that November morning in the 6th floor boardroom, watching my brother realize he's had no escape, I understood something about family that should have become obvious years earlier. The people who underestimate your silence are always shocked when you finally speak. But let me start from the beginning. From the morning I discovered what he'd done. Before the story begins, I want to ask you something. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was working against you? Comment yes or no below. Your answer sure matters more than you think. A quick reminder, this story includes some fictionalized details for privacy and impact, but the lesson about persistence through betrayal is absolutely real. The system denied my password 3 times before I understood what my brother had done. At 38, I had spent 15 years proving I belonged in the CFO chair of Caldwell Construction, the company my father built from a single truck and a dream. I arrived at the 3rd floor accounting office at 7:45 every morning, 45 minutes before anyone else. This Monday felt no different until the login screen rejected me. Account disabled by system administrator. Contact IT for assistance. I tried again, same message. Then a notification appeared. Per CEO directive, CFO financial system access, suspended pending internal review, IT department. I sat motionless for 40 seconds processing what my brother Brent had just done. 9 days until the annual shareholder meeting, and he'd moved first, cutting me off from every financial record. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. My coffee had gone cold. I took a sip anyway, bitter on my tongue, while I calculated my next move. He thought locking me out would end this. He was wrong. I pulled my personal laptop from my bag. 6 months ago, when discrepancies first appeared in quarterly reports, I'd installed security cameras in the conference room and executive hallway. Not company cameras, personal ones connected to a cloud account only I could access. The camera app loaded instantly. 6 months of archived footage, everything backed up to an external drive in my desk drawer. I scrolled to October 20th, late evening, and pressed play. My brother entered the conference room at 9:47 p.m. with a man I didn't recognize. Dark suit, briefcase, careful posture. They sat at the far end of the table. Brent slid a thick folder across the polished wood. The other man reviewed several pages, nodded. An envelope changed hands. I paused on the timestamp. Brent had told the board he was traveling to a conference that week. Yet here he was, in our building, meeting someone after hours with documents he clearly didn't want anyone to see. What did he think would happen when you lock out the one person who actually understands the numbers? I saved the clip to a folder labeled November Evidence and kept scrolling. More footage, more late night meetings, months of careful documentation Brent had no idea existed. He'd locked me out of the financial systems, but he'd forgotten I installed the cameras. My email pinged at 8:32 a.m. The sender showed a random string of letters and numbers, no name, no recognizable domain. Subject line: I know what he did to the August ledger. I opened it. Single sentence: I have documents you'll need. Are you willing to meet? A friend. My cursor hovered over reply. This could be a trap. Brent might have sent someone to see what I knew. Or it could be exactly what it appeared to be. Someone else who noticed what I noticed and was brave enough to reach out. 9 days until the shareholder meeting. 9 days to gather enough evidence to expose what Brent had been doing. If this person was real, I just found my second weapon. I clicked reply and typed 3 words: when and where. The reply came within 20 minutes. German Village coffee shop 3 blocks from the office, 3:15 p.m. He looked exactly like someone who had chosen conscience over career and regretted it every single day since. Griffin Harrington, the 34-year-old accountant my brother had fired 6 months earlier, sat across from me with trembling hands wrapped around his coffee cup. Rain streaked the cafe windows. His tie was loosened. Circles shadowed his eyes. I'm the one who sent you that email this morning, he said quietly. I'm Griffin Harrington. Your brother fired me in May. I remembered the termination. Brent had called it restructuring, standard corporate language that meant nothing. He asked me to backdate vendor invoices and create fake consulting fees, Griffin continued. When I refused, I was gone within a week. Why reach out now? Because I couldn't stay silent anymore. He pulled a manila folder from his bag and slid it across the table. I kept copies of everything he told me to destroy. I opened it. 14 expense reports, each flagged with yellow notes. Fake equipment purchases, phantom consulting fees, fictitious material costs that never appeared on any job site. 14 documents, Griffin said. $312,000. Everyone has Brent's authorization code. I turned the pages slowly, matching dates to budget periods I'd reviewed without seeing the truth underneath. Brent had learned our father's systems and bent them just enough to hide the theft. There's a fourth account I never had access to, Griffin added. I saw quarterly transfers but couldn't trace the destination. Based on the pattern, I'd estimate the real total is north of $500,000. $500,000 stolen from the company my father built with his bare hands, one concrete pour at a time. I closed the folder and met Griffin's eyes. He's been stealing for almost 2 years, and nobody noticed because you trusted him with the systems. The words landed hard. Trust. The foundation Brent had built his theft upon. Keep meeting me when I need you, I said. Don't tell anyone. Not yet. What are you going to do? I have 8 days until the shareholder meeting. That's when I'll use everything you've given me. We agreed to communicate through encrypted email only. No phone calls, no paper trail anyone could intercept. When I left the cafe, rain soaked through my coat. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Brent's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. It's Brent. I think we should talk about your role in the company. Are you free this afternoon? His voice was careful, controlled. The tone he used when he was positioning pieces on a board I couldn't see yet. He wanted to discuss my role this afternoon, 8 days before the shareholder meeting, where he planned to remove me entirely. The question wasn't whether I'd take the meeting. It was whether he already knew I'd spent the last hour gathering evidence of his crimes. I told him I'd come by the next morning. He'd sounded relieved. The HR consultant sitting beside my brother told me everything I needed to know before anyone spoke a single word. Kenneth Draper, the external HR consultant Brent had hired to make this ambush look professional, sat with neutral corporate smile and stack of pre-printed forms. The fifth floor conference room's glass walls overlooked the parking lot my father had paved 20 years ago. Brent's smile was corporate warm as I sat down. Teresa, thanks for making time. Ken Draper is here to help us navigate some organizational restructuring. Restructuring. The word executives used when they wanted to fire people without saying it directly. Brent slid a folder across the table. Executive transition proposal, the label read. An envelope sat inside, check visible through the paper window. We're proposing a transition from CFO to special advisory role. Less operational stress, more strategic focus, Brent continued. The company is prepared to offer a one-time transition payment of $180,000 as recognition of your years of service. I opened the folder and read every page while both men watched. The document stripped my CFO title, removed my financial system access, eliminated my board voting rights, and reclassified me as non-executive consultant with no authority over operations. Everything Brent needed to run the company without interference. This removes my board seat and voting rights, I said calmly. Does Dad's will still specify my ownership stake in the company? Brent's jaw tightened. Legal documents can be updated when family circumstances change, Em. That's not really the issue here. No, Brent, that's exactly the issue. Dad's will says 50-50 for a reason. The conference room went quiet. Kenneth Draper's neutral smile didn't waver, but his pen stopped moving. Did he really think I'd sign away 15 years of work for a check and a hollow title? I closed the folder and set it on the table. The check sat there, uncashed, $180,000 to disappear quietly before the shareholder meeting in 8 days. I'll need to review this with my own legal counsel before signing anything, I said, standing. Em, this is a generous offer. Brent's voice shifted, losing the corporate warmth. I'd hate for us to make this complicated. Complicated, I repeated softly. Like locking me out of the financial systems yesterday? His expression froze. I walked to the elevator, pulled out my phone, and texted Simone Prescott, the sharpest corporate attorney I knew from our college days. Need to meet today. They just confessed. The elevator doors closed on Brent, still sitting at that conference table with his unsigned documents. The text sat in my sent folder like a declaration of war. Because that's exactly what Brent had done. By trying to strip my voting rights before the shareholder meeting, he'd confirmed everything Griffin told me was true. He was removing me because I was the only person who could stop him, which meant he knew I was close to finding out exactly what he'd stolen. That evening, I drove to my parents' house in Upper Arlington. My mother offered me tea like it was any other Tuesday, completely unaware she'd already signed away my legal rights. Judith Caldwell, 67 and proud keeper of family appearances, had spent decades smoothing over problems rather than confronting them. She set the teacup on the coffee table while my father watched the evening news with mild confusion. Walter Caldwell, my 71-year-old father, had built the company over 40 years, but was now slipping into the fog of early dementia. Your brother stopped by last week with some papers for me to sign, Mom said, settling into her chair. Something about protecting family assets. My attention sharpened. What kind of papers? Oh, you know how he handles all the legal things now that your father's memory isn't what it was. She waved her hand dismissively. He said it was just routine paperwork. Do you still have a copy, Mom? I'd like to see what you signed. She retrieved a manila folder from the kitchen drawer and handed it to me. I opened it slowly. Legal petition for guardianship, the header read. My eyes moved down the page. Demonstrated instability in financial judgment, affecting professional capacity. Court-appointed guardian requested to manage legal and financial affairs of Teresa Caldwell. My mother's signature sat at the bottom, dated 6 days ago. It says here I'm mentally unstable and need a court-appointed guardian to make decisions for me. Mom's face went pale. What? No, sweetie. Brent said this was to protect you from liability at the company. I would never. Mom, you just signed a petition asking the judge to declare me legally incompetent. She stood up, hands trembling. I didn't know. He said it was. He told me it would help protect you if anything happened to the company finances, that you'd be safer. My brother had turned our mother into an unwitting weapon against her own daughter. I folded the document and put it in my bag. Dad looked up from the television, eyes unfocused, then returned to the screen. He had no idea what was happening in his own living room. Keep that copy somewhere Dad can't accidentally throw it away, I said quietly. I need the original as evidence. Mom started crying then. Not the performative tears she used to use when she wanted something, but genuine confused grief. I kissed my father's forehead and left. In my car outside, I called Simone. They're filing for guardianship, I said without preamble. He got Mom's signature last week by lying about what the document was. Jesus, Simone breathed. 7 days left, and he's trying to have me declared legally incompetent before the shareholder meeting. We have to move faster. Through the window, I could see my mother's silhouette moving past the kitchen window, still crying over paperwork she didn't understand. Brent hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen our mother's signature to destroy me legally, and she'd given it to him because she trusted her son more than she trusted her own judgment. 7 days until the shareholder meeting, and I just discovered my brother was willing to sacrifice anyone to win. Simone answered on the first ring. Come to my office. Bring everything. I arrived at 11:47 p.m. with Griffin's folder and my laptop. Simone's ninth-floor office overlooked dark Columbus, glass walls reflecting us as we spread documents across her conference table. Start with August, she said, opening a fresh spreadsheet. We worked in systematic silence. I'd call out transactions from Griffin's expense reports. 8,200 for non-existent concrete, $12,500 for phantom subcontractors. Simone cross-referenced dates against my camera footage, then matched them to official transfer records Griffin had copied. Every document aligned. The August 14th delivery that never happened showed Brent alone in his office at 6:23 p.m., laptop open. The transfer posted at 6:31 p.m. to Caldwell Materials LLC, a company that didn't exist. Shell companies, Simone said at 1:15 a.m. 3 so far, all with Caldwell in the name. The pattern repeated across 14 months. Small amounts first, $5,000, $7,500, then bolder. By July, $24,000 at a time. Each theft timed when I was traveling. When Dad was home recovering, when the office was empty. Griffin had documented $312,000. But as we matched his records against my footage, the number climbed. There's a September account, I said, pulling up recent footage. Something Griffin never saw. Simone's fingers flew across her keyboard, cross-referencing routing numbers from screens visible in the footage. At 2:47 a.m., she stopped. Before I show you what we discovered, I need to know, if this were your family's company, would you go straight to court or use the upcoming shareholder meeting as your weapon? Comment court or shareholders below. Remember, this story is fictionalized, but the emotions of corporate betrayal are very real. $520,000. More than most people earn in 10 years, stolen from the company my father built one foundation at a time. That's the exact total, Simone said, quietly, turning her monitor. The spreadsheet showed every transaction, every shell company, every stolen dollar across 22 months. I walked to the window. Downtown was silent at 3 a.m., streetlights reflecting off empty pavement. Court takes months, I said. The guardianship petition freezes me out while we wait. Brent controls everything in the interim. The shareholder meeting is in 6 days, Simone said, understanding. November 19th. Already scheduled, already mandatory. He can't cancel without board approval. I turned from the window. The evidence was complete, but legal proceedings meant months locked out, months where Brent could hide assets, months where Mom's signature gave him temporary control of Dad's shares. We present everything at the meeting, I said, in front of all 17 shareholders. Force an emergency vote before the guardianship hearing. Simone pulled up the bylaws. If we prove malfeasance, they can remove him immediately. No delay. No chance to destroy evidence while we're tied up in court. I gathered the documents. Not anger anymore, strategy. 6 days until Brent faced every shareholder he'd stolen from. 6 days until he discovered I'd been 3 steps ahead. The email arrived at 6:47 Friday morning with the subject line Board Review, Competency Evaluation Results. I was in my apartment kitchen with coffee when my phone chimed. Short North was still dark outside, Columbus streetlights reflecting off November rain. I opened the message and felt my grip tighten on the mug. The attachment was a 6-page psychiatric evaluation. Professional letterhead, clinical language, official signatures, Dr. Lawrence Novak, licensed psychiatrist, concluded I demonstrated significant judgment impairment affecting financial decision-making capacity and recommended immediate removal from executive duties. The email had been sent to all 17 shareholders. Brent's message: per our duty of care, please review the attached independent medical assessment before Tuesday's annual meeting. I set down my coffee and read again. According to Dr. Novak, I exhibited concerning patterns of delusional thinking regarding family members and paranoid ideation inconsistent with sound executive judgment. He sent this to every shareholder, I said to the empty apartment, trying to make them think I'm unstable before Tuesday. The evaluation was dated November 12th. The supposed clinical interview occurred November 8th at Dr. Novak's office on High Street. November 8th. I pulled up my calendar. That was the Cleveland negotiations. I'd never been to any psychiatric appointment, never met any Dr. Novak, never sat for any evaluation. Then I remembered, October 25th, the cafe recording. I opened my phone's audio files and scrolled back 3 weeks. The file was labeled 10 to 25 Starbucks follow-up. I'd been tracking Brent that afternoon, sitting 2 tables behind him at the Clintonville location, recording his conversation with a man I hadn't recognized. I pressed play. Brent's voice came through. I need documentation stating she's not fit for executive decisions. Clinical language, official letterhead. The other man, Dr. Novak, I realize now, responded. Without examining the patient, I can provide a general assessment based on your described observations. Perfect. This envelope should cover your consultation fee and discretion. Paper rustling. Then Brent, make it sound clinical enough that shareholders won't question it. Use terms like judgment impairment, delusional thinking, recommend immediate removal. Did he really think I wouldn't have predicted exactly this move and prepared for it weeks in advance? I forwarded the audio to Simone with the subject line: add charges, medical fraud, bribery, falsifying healthcare documents. Then I attached the evaluation Brent had distributed. The sun was rising over the city, pale light touching wet streets below. I leaned back against the counter and allowed myself something I hadn't felt in weeks: genuine satisfaction. Brent meant this fraudulent evaluation to destroy my credibility before I could present embezzlement evidence. Instead, he'd committed felony healthcare fraud with 20 witnesses on the email chain. The recording proved Dr. Novak never examined me, proved Brent paid for fabricated findings, proved systematic conspiracy. My phone buzzed. Simone's reply: this is prosecutorial gold. He's finished. I looked out at the sunrise, tasting the last of my coffee, bitter and perfect. 4 days left, Brent, I said to the empty room. And you just buried yourself. My brother smiled at 12 assembled shareholders like a man who had already won, completely unaware that the USB drive in my jacket pocket contained his entire destruction. 4 days had passed since I'd sent Simone the recording. Now Tuesday morning had arrived, and I sat in the sixth floor boardroom watching Brent open the annual shareholder meeting with practiced confidence. Harold Montgomery, 72, and board chair for the past decade, sat at the table's head with reading glasses and company bylaws memorized from 40 years. He called the meeting to order at 9 exactly. First item, Brent said, standing at the presentation podium, strategic executive restructuring. The board proposes eliminating the CAO position to streamline decision-making and reduce redundancy in financial oversight. He clicked through slides showing organizational charts, efficiency metrics, cost savings. Never mentioned my name, never acknowledged I was sitting 12 feet away. Just clinical language about dissolving a position that happened to be mine. This positions the company for more Al leadership as we enter our next growth phase, he concluded. Harold looked down the table. Before we vote, does the CFO wish to respond? Corporate bylaws require we hear from affected executives. I stood. The room went quiet. Before this vote proceeds, I said, I have documentation the board needs to review regarding company financial operations. I walked to the presentation station. Brent's eyes tracked my movement. I don't think this is the appropriate venue for operational minutiae, he cut in sharply. We're here to vote on structure. Brent, sit down. Victor Ashford, the senior shareholder who held 18% of company stock, and remembered when my father first poured foundation for his first commercial building, leaned forward. If she says we need to see something before we vote, we're going to see it. The USB drive clicked into place with a sound like a cell door closing. What exactly are you? Brent started. Harold raised one hand. The floor recognizes the CFO. I picked up the presentation remote. 12 shareholders watched me. Brent stood frozen at the podium, caught between sitting and maintaining position. Over the past 22 months, I said, clicking to the first slide, $520,000 has been transferred from company accounts into 4 personal banking accounts. The screen illuminated behind me. Financial discrepancy analysis with a summary table. 4 account numbers, 22 months of dates, corresponding amounts building from $5,000 to $24,000 per transaction. The boardroom fell completely silent. Each transaction is documented with account numbers, dates, and authorization codes, I continued. I watched my brother's face drain from confident tan to ash gray. His eyes locked on the screen, on account numbers he'd opened in secret, on transfers he'd believed were buried. What is this? His voice came out tight. Where did you get company security footage? I said calmly. Cross-reference with transfer records and bank statements from shell companies. The numbers glowed on the 6-foot screen. Every account exposed. Every transfer visible to every person who could vote him out. Brent's hand gripped the podium edge so hard his knuckles went white. And I hadn't even shown them the camera footage yet. I advanced to the second slide without waiting for questions, because the evidence told its own story better than any defense Brent could fabricate. 14 falsified expense reports, I said, each authorized with code CEO001, each corresponding to deposits into personal accounts. The slide showed a bank statement beside an expense report. Dates matched, amounts matched. The expense claimed $32,000 for structural engineering consultation. Camera footage from that week showed a man in the parking garage handing Brent an envelope. I let it play. No sound needed. Transaction complete. Brent pocketing the envelope, walking away. Every falsified document traces to deposits Brent opened himself, I continued. More slides. More footage. September. Meeting someone in the conference room after hours, cash folders visible. October, transfers authorized late at night. November, emails to vendors who didn't exist. 22 months displayed across 47 slides. Harold Montgomery sat still, reading glasses reflecting the screen. Victor Ashford's jaw was set hard. The other shareholders watched in frozen silence. Slide 38, I said, clicking to audio. Brent's voice filled the boardroom. I need documentation stating she's not fit for executive decisions. Clinical language, official letterhead. Doctor. Novak's response. Without examining the patient, I can provide a general assessment based on your described observations. Perfect. This envelope should cover your consultation fee and discretion. 90 seconds. When it ended, the boardroom held 12 people and sounded like a tomb. The psychiatric evaluation my brother submitted 4 days ago was purchased without examination, I said quietly. The guardianship petition he convinced our mother to sign claimed I was mentally unfit. The next slide showed the petition, Judith's signature visible, alongside Brent's email. Just sign here, Mom. This protects our family assets from liability. Trust me. I looked at the door. Griffin Harrington was fired May 14th for refusing to participate. He kept documentation. The door opened. Griffin entered, walked to the empty chair, and sat. He ordered me to backdate vendor invoices, Griffin said steadily. When I refused, he terminated me within the hour. I kept copies of what he wanted destroyed. Harold looked at Brent. Do you have anything to say? Brent stood abruptly, face flushed. This is a coordinated attack. She's manipulated evidence to Brent. Victor Ashford's voice cut like steel. Sit down. Harold removed his reading glasses. I'm calling emergency executive session per bylaws. Motion for immediate CEO removal, pending criminal investigation. Second, Victor said. All in favor? 11 hands rose. Brent couldn't vote on his own removal. Motion passes 11-0. Effective immediately, Brent Caldwell is removed as CEO. Teresa Caldwell appointed acting CEO pending board review. This meeting is adjourned. 11 seconds of absolute silence followed. Then chairs scraped back. Shareholders filed toward the door without speaking. Brent sat motionless, staring at the blank screen. I gathered my USB drive, 47 minutes. 22 months of evidence, complete victory, and it tasted like ash mixed with relief. 3 weeks after I destroyed my brother's career in 47 minutes, I sat alone in my apartment and realized winning had solved exactly nothing about the family that raised us both. The consequences had settled into final positions like chess pieces after checkmate. Federal investigators opened an embezzlement case against Brent. Doctor. Novak faced medical board ethics investigation. The board made it official last Thursday. Acting CEO becomes permanent CEO pending 90-day review. Unanimous vote. I hadn't spoken to Brent since he walked out of the boardroom. His attorney called once asking if I'd consider not cooperating with investigators. I didn't return the call. The company continued operating. Employees whispered about board meetings and removal votes. Shareholders sent support emails. Projects stayed on schedule. The business my father built kept standing because I'd stopped it from collapsing. That should have felt like enough. I stood at my apartment window in Short North, watching December evening settle over Columbus. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement. Inside, my laptop displayed quarterly reports I should have been reviewing. Instead, I was thinking about last week. I'd gone to my parents' house Wednesday afternoon. Mom was out shopping. Dad sat in his chair by the living room window, the same chair he'd occupied since his stroke. Dad, I'd said, sitting across from him. Brent was stealing from the company. I had to stop him. The board removed him as CEO. I explained it gently, simply, watching his face for anger or disappointment, or the confusion that sometimes clouded his thoughts now. He sat silent for long minutes. I waited, barely breathing. Finally, he looked at me. I always knew you'd do right, Teresa. Always knew. That was all he said. That was all I needed. Justice doesn't heal the wound. It just stops the bleeding and leaves you to decide what scar you want to carry. My phone rang at 8, pulling me back to present. Mom's name on screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then answered, Teresa. Her voice trembled, but not with performative tears I'd heard my whole life. This was different, exhausted, real. I didn't know what that paper was. The guardianship thing. I would never. I'm so sorry. I know, Mom. I know you didn't understand. He told me it was legal protection, that it would help your father's medical care. I didn't read it properly. I should have asked you first. Outside my window, first snow of December began falling. Soft white against dark sky, coating the city in temporary quiet. I forgive you, I said, and meant it. Forgiving didn't require forgetting. It didn't require pretending we'd be the family we'd never been. She was quiet for a moment. Then, are you okay? I watched the snow fall harder, covering Columbus in white that would melt by morning. I'm learning how to be, I said. The line went silent except for her breathing, then a soft goodbye. I hung up and stood at the window watching snow settle on empty streets. Protected my father's company, exposed the truth, lost my family in the process. Learning how to be okay with that would take longer than 3 weeks. The brass nameplate outside the sixth-floor corner office read, Theresa Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer, in letters that caught the early January sunrise. I arrived at 6:15, 45 minutes before staff. The hallway was silent except for my footsteps on carpet my father had chosen 18 years ago. I stopped at the door and touched the nameplate once, brass cool under my fingertips, then turned the handle. This office had been my father's before illness forced him to hand control to Brent. The desk was solid oak. The chair was worn leather, molded to Walter's frame across 40 years. I sat down slowly, feeling the weight of those decades settle around me. Last week, the notary confirmed what I'd suspected. Walter's original will, signed 15 years ago before cognitive decline, split company ownership 50-50 between his children. He'd always intended for me to be here. Brent had just convinced him otherwise during the vulnerable years. The office windows faced east. Sunrise was turning Columbus skyline from gray to gold. I opened my laptop and typed my password into the accounting software that had locked me out 9 weeks ago on November 11th. The morning this all began. The system loaded immediately. Welcome back, CEO. Full administrative access granted. I stared at the message. 9 weeks ago, this screen had displayed access denied by system administrator. Brent thought locking me out would end the fight before it started. Thought removing my access meant removing my authority. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about almost everything. The hardest battles aren't won through brilliant strategy. They're won by showing up every single day until the lie gets too exhausted to keep running. Now I controlled every access permission in the company. Same software, same password, completely different authority. I stood and walked to the small coffee machine my father had installed because he never trusted the break room pot. Made myself a cup the way he taught me, 2 scoops, no sugar, patience for the full brew cycle. The coffee was bitter and perfect. I returned to the desk and opened email. 43 unread messages, project timeline questions from the Worthington site, vendor contract renewals, meeting requests for budget reviews, routine Monday operations, nothing dramatic, just work that needed doing. The company stood because I'd stood. The truth emerged because I'd refused to stop gathering it. No victory speech planned, no announcement. Just steady leadership my father would recognize, the kind built on showing up, doing the work, refusing to leave when leaving would have been easier. Outside, full sunrise illuminated the city. Employees would arrive in 30 minutes. The work would continue because it always continued. I took another sip of coffee, tasting 40 years of my father's mornings in this office, feeling the weight of my name on the door outside. The company that tried to destroy me now bore my name. The system that locked me out now welcomed me home. And sitting in my father's chair watching sunrise paint Columbus gold, I understood the only lesson that mattered. Sometimes all you must do is refuse to leave before truth defends itself. And to you listening to my story, remember this: winning doesn't always look like victory. Looking back, I wish I'd trusted my instincts sooner. I saw small signs, that didn't add up, meetings I wasn't invited to, my brother's distance growing. But I told myself it was paranoia, that family loyalty meant giving benefit of the doubt. Don't make my mistake. When something feels wrong in your gut, especially with people you trust completely, start asking questions quietly. Document everything. This revenge story taught me that justice isn't but obstruction, it's about refusing to abandon truth. Whether you're searching for dramatic grandma revenge tales or reading revenge story content like mine, real vindication is quieter than you expect. The hardest battles aren't won through brilliant strategy. They're won by showing up every day until the lie exhausts itself. I believe God put me through this test to learn that patience and persistence matter more than instant vindication, and that His timing is always perfect. Now I want to hear from you. Have you faced a situation where quiet persistence won over confrontation? Leave a comment below. If this revenge story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that endurance matters. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories about standing your ground when everything tells you to walk away. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything. Final reminder: while certain details are fictionalized to protect privacy, the core message about truth, persistence, and refusing to leave before justice arrives, that's real. God bless you.